So please keep your seats for the first session, and let me introduce the moderator of this first session, Raghida Derham, who is columnist with the Whole Hayat, founder and executive chairman of Beirut Institute, which is a think tank for the Arab region. Hello, Raghida, and the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good afternoon. When I was asked to come back to the Women's Forum in Deauville, the first thing I said, absolutely yes. Where else can I have and be in the company of women who are talented and who care and who really push the envelope, because it's still too early to settle. We have a lot to do, and this forum does it so well, passionately and intelligently. And I am absolutely honored to be with you. I'm absolutely honored to open up this plenary with two women. I want to tell you that Minister Belkacem, Najat Vallaud-Belkacem, will be unable to join us now, but she should be at the forum at 6:15, I believe. They will announce later where. But can you imagine that I am going to have the opportunity to have a conversation with two Nobel laureates who are women? Can you imagine how privileged I am to sit and get the chance, the right to ask questions of those two women? And I'll tell you what, I've had a very interesting 2 weeks. I was in New York at a certain function, and there was Antoine Souchi and Christine Lagarde, and I got the chance to be with the two of them and converse with the two of them together and take a picture with the two of them. So that was really great. Two great women. And then I was walking down the streets in New York, and I ran into Mary Robinson, the former president of Ireland. Well, we talked, and all of a sudden there's another woman coming up, and that was Bachelet, of course, the former president of Chile. And so all of a sudden, I said, I don't take pictures, but now I'm going to do this, take pictures again. So it looks like 2 in a row, and this really will top it all because of the length of the conversation we have. But I first want to make sure that I mention to you to get ready with your headphones to listen to Dr. Shireen Ebadi. So be ready with that. Until you're ready, I will just tell you a couple of things, because I tried to persuade her to speak in English after her introductory remarks of 12 minutes, 10 minutes. And Lema Bowie looked at me and she said, don't even go there. If she said no, it's a no. So she's a very determined woman, a bolt, I call her, a woman of principle, a woman who does not think compromise is something that we need to do every day. We women, we've been raised on this notion of compromise. Dr. Ebadi has fought her way because of her beliefs, very strong beliefs in the necessity to change and to look after women's rights, civil rights, as civil rights. She has been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2003 for her efforts to promote these children's rights, not only women's rights, and political prisoners in Iran. One of the first female judges in Iran, and the first to achieve the status of Chief Justice. Later, when no longer permitted to sit as a judge, she obtained her lawyer's license and took many controversial cases defending political dissidents. Author of over 70 articles and 13 books, she is an outspoken advocate for women's rights in the Middle East and beyond. We will listen to Dr. Ebadi give us her presentation, after which I will invite her to have a conversation for about 5 minutes. And then I will invite Ms. Bowie to come to the stage, and she chose to be interviewed rather than give a keynote address. And that is her choice. So we will have a lengthier conversation, and then the three of us will try to bring you a real wonderful opening plenary at this amazing forum for women, of women by women. Thank you. Dr. Ebadi, please.
You need your headsets. My greetings to everyone here. I am extremely happy and honored. I feel very grateful to be able to be amongst you this year as well. Last year, when I made a speech, I said in my speech that some of the Western media are speaking about the Arab Spring. I am against the use of the word spring. And I tell you why. Because I think we can only have spring when women also achieve equal rights. Now a year has passed since I was here last, and I am sorry to say that in these countries where they managed to topple their dictators, women have not yet realized equal rights. But the good news is that women in these countries, especially in Tunisia and in Egypt, have been fighting intensively for equal rights. They are saying to these Islamic governments that have come to power that you have absolutely no right to use and abuse the name of Islam. They say to this government, you must officially recognize the equal rights of women. Now, in relation to the theme of this year's forum, the important question that arises is, what should we do? What can we do to ensure that women achieve equal rights? In my personal opinion, the most important issue in the Islamic world is education as the way of ensuring that women achieve equal rights. My slogan has always been this: education is the only way to liberation. That has been my motto. In other words, unless you educate women, unless you teach them to specialize in certain skills in order to eke out a living and have an income, we cannot expect women to end the discriminatory predicament they are facing at the moment. And it is for this very reason that we see in the Middle East, and especially the Islamic countries in the Middle East, Iran has the strongest feminist movement in the Islamic world. This is because 65% of our students in universities are female. We have a large number of highly educated women in our country. And in any country where there are not enough educated women, as we see in the world of Islam, in some Islamic countries, the women's situation is worse. Which is why the Islamic fundamentalists who or adherents of a patriarchal culture, they do their utmost to put obstacles in the way of women's education. One example of that was the Taliban. When the Taliban came to power in Afghanistan, they shut down all the girls' schools. They told women that they should sit at home and be housewives and cooks. There is no need for women to be educated. When the Taliban were toppled, which was after the American went to Afghanistan, they reopened the girls' schools. Yet, in many regions of Afghanistan, the Taliban set many of these schools on fire. Many girls were killed in these fires. Why? Because all these girls wanted to do was to become literate, to become educated. So why are the Taliban and other Islamic fundamentalists, why are they against the education of women? I tell you why. Because they know that once a woman is educated, that woman will oppose gender discrimination. And that if this discrimination is removed, that would be the beginning of democracy. Because democracy and human rights are the two sides of the same coin. I call on you, very educated women who are sitting here. I want to take you on a journey to Pakistan to tell you what happened there recently. In Pakistan, in a village that used to be controlled by the Taliban, and the Taliban were very influential there, they closed all the girls' schools. But there was a girl, an 11-year-old girl, who stood up to them, and she single-handedly started a campaign against the Taliban, a campaign to ensure that girls have a right to education, calling for girls' education. She was writing a blog using a pen name, and I'm talking about an 11-year-old girl because she didn't want her identity to be known by the Taliban. But once the Pakistani government succeeded to make sure the Taliban left where she lived, which was the Swat Valley, they gave this girl an award because of the campaign that she'd started to promote girls' education. This young girl was given an award for bravery, but that award actually revealed her identity. And that girl, who is now 14 years old, and listen, she was only 11 when on her own she started a campaign calling for education for women, and now she's 14 years old. And when they gave her a bravery award, the Taliban, of course, became aware of her identity. And she was shot in the head yesterday, and she's called Malala. Malala is currently in hospital, but fortunately she survived. This brave girl is lying on her hospital bed, but is addressing each and one of you. Please applaud Malala. And my question to you, the organizers of this forum, and my question also to you who are taking part in this forum, is this: what can you do for Malala? We're not talking about just one girl and one woman. We're talking about one right. We are talking about the right of education for women. If we support Malala, in fact, through that, we have shown our support for one of the basic rights of women, the most basic right, which is the right to education. So I urge the organizers of this forum to take steps, perhaps issue a resolution, and if possible, give financial support to this girl who at the age of 14 is on a hospital bed merely because she waged a campaign against the Taliban. I and all Muslim women, we believe that Malala's victory will, to all intents and purposes, be tantamount to the victory of us all women. Thank you. Be successful.
Please. I'm so touched, and I so appreciate that you have put the story of Malala right in the heart of this forum. I was telling our next speaker about Malala, and I heard about her last night at dinner, sitting with a journalist who was a great journalist, friend of mine as well, and her name is Caroline Laurent-Simon. And she said, please, Raghida, make sure the story of Malala is at the forum. So I carried that message, and I had no idea that you're going to put it right at the heart of this forum. Thank you for that. We really need to do something for Malala. Thank you. It's not working. Let me put it on for you, please. Okay. Is it working now? No, not yet. Could somebody help us, please?
Mariam.
Can Mariam say something?
No? It doesn't work.
But you could understand me, right? And when you speak, okay. You spoke of education. And you said in Iran in particular, you have 66% of women, of university students are women. However, we understand that there have been recent restrictions in Iran by the government imposed on education of women. We understand that there are, in 36 universities, they have barred women from studying 77 subjects. What is going on there? What are the women doing about it? What should they do about it?
As I said in my speech earlier, Islamic fundamentalists oppose education of women. They do not want women to have knowledge and education, because that would make women aware of their rights. And once they become aware of their rights, they stand up to the undemocratic Islamic countries. We have many highly educated women in Iran. And they have stood up to the Islamic Republic, and they're fighting it. Alice, at present, we have at least 50 Iranian feminist women in prison in Iran. Why? Because they wanted equal rights. Yet, they have been charged with acting against national security. I am acting as the lawyer of some of these women. I remember I said to the prosecutor once that if a woman once says, "I don't want my husband to have another wife," and I do not want to share my life with my husband with another woman, do you take that as me saying that something is against the national security? Does it mean America is going to attack us? Is it going to be to the advantage of Israel just because I'm asking for my right? So why are you charging them with acting against national security? Unfortunately, in dictatorships, there are no independent courts of law. And anyway, as a result, these women have been sentenced. The regime in the Islamic Republic of Iran is determined to lower the number of educated women because they want to be able to control these women more in the future. As a result, they have imposed all kinds of restrictions for women. For instance, from this academic year, which began in September in Iran, some 36 universities in Iran have banned female students from taking 77 subjects. They barred these women from studying these subjects. So I protested. And I made my voice heard by writing to UN Women and also the UN Special Rapporteur on Iran and also the Special Rapporteur of the UN for the rights to education. I spoke to them, I protested, and other individuals like me who, for political reasons, cannot be in Iran, people like me who have to be part of a diaspora because for political reasons we cannot go back. We have to make sure that the voices of our people are heard outside the country. As a result, I travel 10 months of the year.
As a follow-up, what are the subjects that they were not allowed to study? Just give us an example. And what did UN Women do about your launch of the complaint or campaign? Is that unit at the United Nations, is it acting quickly enough to address and correct the wrongs committed by governments?
The structure of the United Nations is such that it can only protest and it cannot directly intervene in any situations. Yet it was our duty to inform them. But the main struggle is initiated by women in Iran. And that is women from all different strata, all different classes. And as for the restrictions, the subjects they've been barred from are mainly engineering, such as oil engineering and civil engineering.
About the situation of women in the Islamic world, in the Muslim world. Each continent, if you will, has its own particular laws that discriminate, and there are others who are also a victim of poverty as well as the laws. I wonder if we can just quickly pass through we'll talk about Africa a little more, but in the Arab region, you mentioned that dictators were toppled. Yes, they were. But women's rights have regressed. It's not that all of a sudden the cry for democracy brought in the equal rights of women, or at least the civil rights, the human rights of women. In fact, many of the rulers are trying to play around, saying, I interviewed last week or 10 days ago, I interviewed the president of Libya. And he said he believes that there should be a secular constitution, but he said, well, somehow colored with Sharia, somehow based on the Sharia. You in Iran have had this experience. You have, as women of Iran, have your own story or tale to tell. What do you say to the women of the Arab region, the Arab world, who are being faced with these difficulties? What should they be doing? What should we do to make them do better?
Islamic regimes have been exploiting the name of Islam in order to justify oppressing women. While Islam, like every other religion in the world, has different interpretations. For instance, in Europe, you get a church that accepts the rights of homosexuals to get married, and another is against it. You get a church who is against abortion, you get another church who accepts abortion. Yet they're all Christians, they all believe in Christianity. So the same thing applies to Islam. Islam has various interpretations. Yet the dictators who by nature are patriarchals and they are following a patriarchal culture, they do not want to accept an interpretation that recognizes equal rights for women. For instance, in Iran, a set of discriminatory laws were endorsed by the Islamic regime. Yet, we had some high-ranking clerics who have opposed these discriminatory laws against women. They have said these laws are not Islamic and they can be changed. However, these high-ranking clerics that I mentioned are sadly not in power, and because of that, the regime is not accepting their word and their interpretation. So now it is time for us Muslim women to make sure that our religion is understood correctly. We have to research about our religion. We have to come up with correct interpretations of our religion. So far, all the interpretations of the Quran were made by men and by patriarchal societies.
With Islam?
Yes, of course, they're allowed. Yes, in Islam, we also have some women who are mujtahids, which means they can do research on Islamic interpretation. One of these mujtahid women actually lived in Iran. And that is why I call on all all Muslim women, and I say to them, and I repeat, that education is the key to liberation. Understand your religion, know your religion, and then you will know that your religion is against discriminations. It is now the time for Islamic women to interpret the Quran.
I ask you, because I want to continue this conversation in a wonderful, in the presence of another wonderful woman. So may I ask you to kindly take the next seat as I welcome Leymah Gbowee. Of course, we know Leymah Gbowee is our other Nobel laureate. She has been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2011 for her leadership of a women's movement that was pivotal in ending the second Liberian civil war in 2003. Lema published last year, Mighty Be Our Powers, How Sisterhood, Prayer, and Sex Changed a Nation at War, bestseller about the movement that she has started. Today, she continues her leadership for women and peace as the president of the Bowie Peace Foundation in Africa, head of the Liberia Reconciliation Initiative. No? Well, you could. Oh, she just resigned. Okay, so we're not wrong. She just resigned. You'll tell us why later. And she's the executive director of Women, Peace and Security Network in Africa. You know, you have so many different wonderful angles to your body of work. I don't even know where to begin with you, but shall we start with your interest in conflict, women in conflict, in the context of searching for peace, and whether this is something women are better equipped at, have been given the chance to do? Has there been enough recognition, global and local recognition of women's talent in that domain?
Thank you. And thank you all for having me here today. This is my first Duville, and I'm glad to be sharing the space with Shireen. Just before I get into your question, 3 weeks ago I had the pleasure of sitting in a meeting with Shireen and Jody Williams, being one of the newest Nobel laureates, and watching these two women go back and forth on an issue. I smiled and said, I think the Nobel Committee do some DNA testing on women before awarding them the prize, because the willpower of both women was just, and I just told myself, stay out of the conversation, because if you just add your voice, there will be a volcanic eruption in this room. I'm just amazed at the power of...
I said the bolt, thunder.
But coming back to your question, I tell people when you look at my life and you ask me, why do you think you qualify for being an activist? I tell them I have all of the degrees in everything, from internally displaced to survivor of war to refugee to single mother victim of domestic violence. So I don't know how to categorize them, but double master's, PhD, all of the problems that women have encountered. And at 17, I experienced war. And I experienced war that, the war in Liberia was one of those wars that was fought on the bodies of women, but also when it came to the resolution of that war, the needs, concerns, and priorities of women were not considered. And from the inception of the war, the Liberian women had been going back and forth, trying to get involved, women before my time. And we just weren't getting anywhere. But, you know, reading the history of wars and reading and looking back at it, and when we stepped in 2003 as grassroots women, saying to ourselves we want to shift the focus of the global attention on this war from the military side to the social or the human side, we made some impact. But if you go back into history and look at the roles that women played during conflict, the one question I keep asking people when they ask, why do you think women are better qualified? The question I ask back is, when the men are fighting and shooting each other, and at the end of the war, you see a whole community of people still alive, do you start to ask, how is this possible? Who kept them alive? Who was in it? So there's another battle.
But are you saying, are you saying that women are more talented at it? Are you saying that the men have failed, did not do too well, and so let's try women? Or are you saying there is a talent? There's a talent.
But because I'm biased,
yeah.
I'm a feminist, no if, no but. And I think women are better placed to do peace. I really do think women are better placed to do peace. If you sit back and look at the way peace negotiations are done, I was at the Liberian peace talks. There was never a time when any of those people considered the needs of communities, the men around the table. It was all about jobs. It was all about who got the most lucrative area of the natural resources.
So how do we do it? how do we do it better? This is the whole session, is that what do we have to do it better?
I think a recognition first, because this is where we're struggling now. That recognition of women's role, not just at the grassroots level. Because yes, globally people recognize that women at the grassroots level can do work, but a recognition that at the middle level and the top level, until we start seeing women's mediator, until when peace talks are being called and women are brought to the table, not as observers, but as party to the conflict. How do you fight a war on individual bodies and tell them just observe the way your life is going to be negotiated for a long time?
Should there be training by governments? Should there be training by international organizations,
Please,
by groups?
I do not even want to go on that training trend. Some of the people you see around the peace tables who are representing parties, I'm sorry to say, but they are total idiots. They are not as intelligent as some of the women we know. And then we constantly get this lame excuse that we don't have qualified women. What is there to negotiate? I think it's wrong.
Right. Tell me, how do you negotiate amongst your children? You are a mother of 6, 5 are teenagers. And you are a Nobel laureate who runs around the world, gives 20 interviews per 20 seconds. How do you do it? How do you negotiate?
You know, I have 2 sons that I feel very sorry for because they are the minority in my home and they tend to really suffer. But the one thing my kids know, I am a sucker when it comes to them. I love them. But I think somehow I've established that you don't disrespect me. We play by my rules.
What a Democrat.
Yeah. No, there's no democracy in my home. I will do what you want me to. I will support you, your efforts and everything as long as...
But I own you.
Yes. So let me give you a typical example. I have a 19-year-old who goes to school in America. So I think his first semester in school, he felt liberated. So I go to his campus and we're talking something and he starts the American way. Oh, Mama, you know this? So I have this thing that I do. Pop, it means I've paused the tape. So I go, pop, the tape is paused. He stops. And his friends are watching. And then I do, we're rewinding. Pop, we play again. And then he starts all over. Ma'am, as I was saying.
Yes. Listen, you did something also. I'm sure a lot of women in this audience are very well aware of your drive for sex strike. Now, for those who don't know, I think I will give you the opportunity to explain what did you use sex for? Or the lack of.
You know, we went to, during the peace talks or the civil war in Liberia, when we started this mass movement of women, is chronicled in a documentary called Pray the Devil Back to Hell, for those of you who have never seen it. We were so desperate for peace that it's just a bunch of us, community women. Some of us had read Gandhi and King, and that was our only experience with nonviolence protests. And we started doing different tactics, and every day, if someone came and said, let's try this, we tried it.
Yeah.
It was like a try and error that was successful at the end. So one of the Muslim women, talking about Muslim women and our perception that they're well-behaved, came up and said, let's do sex strike. And we didn't even ask what we wanted to do. Why do you think so? I said, well, there are more good men than bad men. The men who are sitting on the sidelines without guns are more than the men with guns. And those men are some of our husbands, our brothers, our fathers. If we introduce a sex strike to move them to action, not to join our movement, but to start talking to some of the warlords who are their buddies and their former schoolmates to lay down their arms. So if we pressure them, they will pressure their friends. We declared that. But before we declared the sex strike, we got little or no media attention.
Oh.
And the sex strike was a beautiful media tool.
Yeah.
Because the media likes what is sexy.
Yes.
So by the time we said that, every local media wanted to come and see this group of women.
Denying their husband's sex.
Yes.
Yeah. So how did that go?
Well,
were some women beaten up?
Yes,
just
some
get
people
over
came
here,
back to
I
us
own
and
you.
said, you know what, it's not working. We've been having serious crisis. But in the rural area, the women were smarter than we were. They took their husbands to the church and to the mosques and said, we're fasting for peace. And the act of fasting is self-denial. So we're asking you to join us not to have sex so that we can continue to pray and push for peace. In the presence of God, can you agree or disagree? Of course they agreed in the presence of God.
You're a very religious woman. How much did this help you in the difficult times? I know faith is the most important guide for women of faith, men of faith, but was this instrumental in your own personal voyage all the way to here, all the way through the Nobel Peace Prize, etc.?
You know, I have this joke. I moved back to Liberia in January, and my good friend Thelma would call from Nigeria to check on me.
We're going to talk about Thelma.
And then
Wait.
she says, Ray, she calls me Ray. How is it? And I say, if you're trying to get to Jesus and the line is busy, I'm holding up the line. My faith is the key to my life. From a single parent of 6 children to going into very difficult and depressing places, working with women and girls, to coming to this global stage, meeting women of very important, doing equally important work. I look at my own life, my own life's journey, and I tell myself, had it not been for God, I don't think I would be to where I find myself today. Just a few years back, I was a refugee. I had a baby literally on the floor of a hospital. I had nothing, absolutely nothing. And if people don't believe in the divine grace, I don't know what. But I feel I'm where I am today because of him. Because I look at my life, look at the Nobel, and then I say to myself, wow, there are women doing greater work, much more important work. And I'm not going to deceive myself to think that I'm smarter than a lot of the women out there doing activism. If this is not what is called divine favor, that was my private reflection on the Nobel Prize. And my faith continues to be a major tool. I'm sitting here nursing a very tough back pain. But from this morning till now, I've been telling Jesus, hold my waist.
Hold your waist.
Yes,
that's really funny.
I need it. That's why I'm, my faith is important.
I'm going to bring Dr. Shireen Ebadi into the conversation. But while I'm doing this, tell us about Thelma.
Well, Thelma is my age. We both are 40, except that I was born February and she was born July. And Thelma and I met 1999 at a conference in Accra. From the get-go, because I'm a grassroots activist, I thought she was a snob. Educated in Canada, very polite for a Nigerian. Really ladylike. And I would just sit there and watch this girl order men around, very pretty. And then we didn't know that the two of us shared the same thing. There was this night we were going to, the organizers of the meeting felt we all needed to relax and go to a club. I was protesting because I didn't want to go. I wore a baseball cap and my jeans. She wore a pair of slippers. We got to the club and they refused the two of us entry. So then the men and others who brought us said, the two of you have to sit in a car until we finish and then we'll take you home. So she's in one corner, I'm in the other corner, and both faces out the window. Finally, she asked me, what do you do? I said, oh, so you speak. Well, we started talking and then realized we shared the same passion. But the beauty of my friendship with Thelma is that from the get-go, she became that sister and mentor for me. When we went to trainings and I had to facilitate trainings, she would be evaluating me. And we'll go into the room and she'll say, you did this right, you did this wrong. And I think for many years, she was the only person that really frightened me when it came to professional work. And we now have this joke that we tell each other that if we even kill someone who will both bury that person and lie about it. That's how close.
Friendship.
But I think when you talk about, and we're thinking about writing a book about sisterhood in feminism, because this is something that people tend to say doesn't exist. The professional competition and the jealousy and envy, and you constantly hear women are their worst enemies and all of these different things. But I think we've come to the place after I don't know how many years of really just showing that once you understand as a woman the unique quality your colleague bring to a platform, and you understand your unique quality, you can work together without those tensions. And I think that is the most important thing that the both of us have come to realize and recognize.
Dr. Ebadi, first of all, let me again give you the opportunity to appreciate the comments before I go on to open it up. You know, tomorrow I think it's the girls. What is it called?
International Day of the Girl
The International Day of the Girl's Child at the United Nations. I know, Dr. Ebadi, you spoke of the very important role of education. I totally agree with you. But what else do we have to do for girls so that we don't wait too long? After all, the populations, especially with the third world, are mostly under age 18. What is it that we've failed in doing for girls? And what is it that we should think about to move it forward?
One of the problems encountered by young girls in the third world is forced marriages at a very early age. There is also the problem of poverty and lack of awareness. Actually, poverty and lack of awareness is the reason why they sometimes force these young girls to get married when they're at an age when they should be at school. So, enforced marriages of these young girls is something we should really work on, especially in poorer countries and the countries which have very little income. Another issue which I wish to reiterate, it goes back to the families themselves. Because I have seen for myself how in some families they discriminate between the sons and the daughters. These families are willing to pay any kind of fees for their sons to go to university, but when it comes to their daughters, they don't. If they have money, they send their sons abroad, to the United States, to Europe. But when it comes to their daughters, they say that a girl's place is at home. And it doesn't matter if a girl doesn't have a PhD. So they discriminate between their sons and daughters. That is why this is another issue we have to work on, to make sure that such discrimination does not exist within families. We cannot blame everything on the governments, on the states.
United Nations. What are you taking on this issue?
Well, I think, especially coming back to the question in this room, what can we do better? Earlier on this year, I launched a foundation. We started to provide scholarship for girls. And I told myself it's easy. You know, just look for money, talk to universities, and get girls in school. And then I realized that it's not as easy as I thought. Because before you can even start the whole conversation of girls' education, you have to look at some of the social issues affecting the girls. You have the whole thing of teenage pregnancy in some communities, poor or no access at all to reproductive health or the families have no idea that some of these girls have to go through some of those things. You have the thing of child prostitution in some of these communities. But above and beyond all of these things, working with some of the girls in the different communities, I think there's a serious need for mentorship. We can have the Women's Forum, and I was glad to see the Rising Initiative.
Yes, wasn't that
But
beautiful?
at the local levels, it is important for us, whether it's in France or Germany, we need to make that connection on why we come to Deauville every year. We need to make the connection of why there is an African Women's Leaders Network on reproductive rights and family planning. There's a disconnect between what we do, what we advocate for, and these young girls who are supposed to walk in our shoes tomorrow. Whilst we talk for education and the rights of girls, I think it's not just enough to say we will educate the girls, but there should be a focus on holistic education. How do we prepare our girls for the future? Economic empowerment, I talk about the reproductive health and rights issue.
But how do you do it other than education? How else?
I think there's a...
Mentorship is one way, you spoke about that.
But the
How do you make it
current educational
institutionalized?
System in our different countries has a serious deficit. If you look at education, let me speak from Africa. Primary to secondary school, there's a total disconnect. Secondary to university, there's a disconnect. From university to the job market, there is a serious disconnect. How do you leave high school as a girl, and even as you're making it in college, thinking about a holistic future, you know, making money and all of these different things? So how do we really advocate for some of these reforms to happen in our different countries so that education is favorable? But also, some of the policies around girls' education, it's not just enough to build schools and put in, we are looking for 1,000 girls to go to school, when the school is also one of the most dangerous places for girls to go. Sexual abuse and exploitation in most of our schools is a major problem. One of the students that we have on our scholarship currently is 16. She's the only one in her village who made it to 8th grade. She's the only one who has not gotten pregnant at 16. The reason why she became an interest to us, when we started talking to the girls in her circle, she was like, her biggest fear in her entire life was of her English teacher. Every time she said, I do not understand what you're teaching me, he'd tell her, get under it. For her, it meant sleep with me because he had just impregnated her 16-year-old friend. We have these issues in some of our schools until we can deal with it. I was in South Africa in April, and one of the things I got from one of the professors at Rhodes University is that sexual exploitation and abuse is not just limited to West Africa, Lima. We have it here, but our teachers are protected by unions. How do we have systems that are functional for girls?
Absolutely. Dr. Ebadi, does a similar but more covered up problem exist in the Muslim world? Or where the word sex is really like almost taboo, you can't. Do we have such problems, not as large as in Africa, but do they exist, or is there another different type of abuse, sexual abuse, women or girls in particular are suffering from?
In Islamic countries, yes, sex is a taboo subject. I have not yet come across an Islamic countries where they have sex education. They do not speak about sex at schools. They don't teach them about sex. However, I must add that the problem of girls in Islamic countries is that they are forced to get married at a very early age. In terms of prostitution, I think there is less prostitution in the Islamic countries because it's not possible for young people to have free interaction, and there is a patriarchal culture that is dominant in these countries. But one problem I have to highlight is honor killings, which do take place in these Islamic countries. So, which is why there is less degree of prostitution in these countries, because the girls are scared. There are honor killings, there is forced marriages, and I think that is a real problem. For instance, a 14-year-old girl has to get married and has to have children. And even lower than 14 years, they are forced to get married. When we had the Islamic Revolution in Iran, and an Islamic dictatorship came to power, they lowered the age of marriage to the age of 9. In other words, a 9-year-old girl was forced to get married. That, to me, is a crime. We women in Iran tried very hard to increase this age of marriage to 18 and to ban marriage under the age of 18, but sadly we have not succeeded. We managed to make some reforms, and now the legal age has gone up to 13 for girls and 15 for boys. And to me, this is still ridiculous that the law allows a 13-year-old girl to get married and have children. But as Leymah also mentioned, the problems of girls in various parts of the world and in various cultures are different according to the cultures that they come from. In Africa, I'm sure the girls may have different problems, and in Islamic countries, the main problem is forced marriages.
Heard the other day and shocked me in Tunisia, where women are very powerful and they're stopping this drive against them, and the attempt by some to introduce laws that will weaken or take away from the laws they already had from the old regime, from Bourguiba actually. So I was stunned when I heard that a woman who had been raped by 3 policemen was actually put on trial by the judge, and he was accusing her of being the cause. Why? Because she dressed inappropriately. This is a country that just went through a revolution. This is a country that has just gotten rid of a dictator. What do you do when this sort of thing happens? This is a country that is entertaining, or at least some parts of the people in power are entertaining, taking away the status of women, which is the best in the Arab world, from the Tunisian women, and replacing it by a status that would declare women as only complementary to men by constitution, in the constitution, that women cannot be an independent entity. They are only complementary to men. What do you do, Shireen? How do you go from here? And then I'll ask you to come in, Ayman. Go ahead. Yes.
As I mentioned earlier, patriarchal culture sees women as tools for procreation. Their purpose is for copulation and procreation, and they see women as the weaker sex. And when it comes to religion, this patriarchal culture comes up with its own interpretation of religion in order to justify its discriminatory laws. In And this is one of the real problems that we encounter in Islamic countries. And that is why I keep repeating that we have to come up with better and more correct interpretations of Islam to identify our problems. The problem isn't necessarily religion, it is the patriarchal culture and their interpretation of religion. In some Islamic countries such as Pakistan, we have seen that on many occasions that when a woman is raped or a girl is raped, instead of supporting that woman, the family of that woman kill her. Because they say by killing that woman, we have managed to maintain the honor of our family and wash off the disgrace from our family. In fact, they see a woman. In fact, this woman who's been raped has not only suffered from the oppression of rape, but even their own families and tribes.
We have, and I really want to change this mood because it is very depressing, but it's a fact. It's a reality that we have to not pretend that it's not there. However, there are lots of good stories and inspirational stories, and we already had, started out this session before our session with such inspiration with the young women who are going places. Let us talk a little bit for the last 5 minutes about happy stories. How do we go? What? 1 second. Hold on. Don't jump. No.
I will jump in.
Try to argue with a Nobel laureate. See, two of them. Pity me.
The point that I want to make, you ask Shireen a question first.
Okay.
The one thing that I want us to start to do moving forward is not to categorize the problems of women by regions of the world. It will not help us. Women's rights are abused everywhere. And so personally I tell people my work is borderless. I don't have a space. I may be from Africa, but if I'm in the Arab world and there's something happening, I will speak up against it. So when we start to give skills of abuse to continents and to regions, we're causing more harm than good. So that's moving forward what we can do better. In terms of the Arab Spring or the revolution and all of the things that happen, I just want to link something that we see is a trend. When there is an uprising in countries, women are so desperate for peace that we fail to chart a political future for ourselves. So whilst we are protesting, we do not have our think tanks in the room strategizing. We do not have people thinking, how do we move forward?
Yes.
I tell people it was by divine, whatever you want to call it, that we had Africa's first female president. Because as Liberian women, we had no political strategy. All we wanted was peace. When the Arab Spring was happening, Egypt, Tunisia, all of the different places, the question I kept asking myself, do they have a group of women sitting somewhere and thinking about the constitution, thinking about governance, thinking about funding, thinking about how to move up? Because these are very important
allow me to give you answers. We have people. Last year we had here a young woman. It was with you in the same panel that I moderated. 27-year-old woman working exactly on that in Tunisia, working exactly on the constitutions. She's monitoring what they're doing. She is. We do have. This is what I meant to say about great stories. I want to just tell you, and thank you for mentioning think tanks. One of the reasons I established think tank for the Arab region, Beirut Institute, is to do exactly what you're saying. So, but these are small, these are the good stories I wanted to talk about, to just say it's not all bad and we're not all sort of sleeping and not thinking about it.
I just wanted to end moving forward. Sorry, Shireen. The point that, and I'll shut up after here, when you have your think tank, what we see in mass movement is that you have a group of people who are prepared to do everything for change. So I will give you a typical example of Liberia. We said peace, peace, peace. When it came to a particular point, if we had a political strategy, after peace, we would have reconvened those same women and said to them, this is our next strategy to advocate on.
That's right.
And until we can, yes, you can have all of the think tank, but the think tank must be driven by the masses. And usually when there are think tanks, there's a disconnect between the think tank, because predominantly the think tank are elite women who come to Deauville, and the masses are those who never
What's
make
wrong
it
with
on
women who
airplane.
come to Deauville?
No. I'm just saying, until
Nothing
we
is
can
wrong with
find
women
that
too.
connection, moving forward, what can we do better? How can we link top, middle, and bottom to make change for women's rights around the world? I shut up.
Shirin Ebadi.
I totally agree that we have to work for all women, wherever they are from in the world, and that we shouldn't restrict ourselves to our own regions or our own countries. Victory of every woman, wherever she lives around the world, is tantamount to the victory of all women around the world. And the failure of one woman is a failure of all women. Yet, bear in mind that to be able to improve the situation of women around the world, we have to identify the problems. You have to know your enemy. Until you know your enemy, and until you know what kind of weapons the enemy is going to use to attack you, you cannot achieve victory. That is why I say that the problems of women, and in every region, may be different from one another, because the enemies have different tools. In one place, as an example, in Islamic countries, as I mentioned, there is the problem of enforced marriage, and sometimes at the age of 9. And in another region of the world, the problem could be teenage pregnancy. And a girl could get pregnant very easily at a very early age. So we have to identify the root of the problem in order to come up with the right solutions. That is why I totally agree with what Lema said at the end, that we have to have think tanks. And these think tanks must include all women from whatever their class, whatever their strata. They all have to be from grassroots, from whatever culture. All these women should have a say in these think tanks. And then we have to analyze these problems, and we have to talk about these problems. We have to have brainstorming sessions in order to come up with solutions. There is not just one solution for one problem, because that solution may come to a deadlock for political reasons or economic reasons. So we have to come up with parallel solutions, with multiple solutions, in order to try and resolve these problems. So until we know the root of the problems from a sociological aspect, an economic aspect, and political aspect, we have to identify these problems and then come up with the good. But now the good news. I'm going to give you the good news. The world of women or one of the worst examples of women's situation is in Saudi Arabia, who couldn't even drive. But some 20 days ago, a woman in Saudi Arabia, who is also a princess, is from the royal family in Saudi Arabia, she'd appeared on television without the hijab, without a headscarf, and was speaking about women's rights. Now, 3 years ago, that girl would have been beheaded. But just the fact that a woman from Saudi Arabia like me manages now to come and speak on a platform and speak about the rights of women and say that we women are not the slaves of you men was very interesting. I know that there are many such women who break taboos. They exist everywhere, these women, be it in Africa, be it in Japan, be it in Saudi Arabia, Iran. We all have to unite. We have to work as a cohesive group, and with unity we will achieve victory.
Such as what we have here in Deauville, I am sure we all will have our contribution to make to this aspiration. I would like to just make a couple of announcements before I close our part, because I've just been told that we need to close with the AFP images of our subject. That will take a minute and a half. A Cartier film, 3 minutes. And I don't know what this says, but it says, please announce, timekeeper will signal. At any rate, before I close this session, I want to say this. It is indeed an honor and a privilege to be in the company of these two magnificent women, and to repeat that it is a highlight of my career to have the opportunity to have a conversation with the two of you. I thank you. I thought we had one lightning bolt in this room. Well, I ended up with two, as you could see. So please applaud our guests and for this wonderful plenary. And I want to say, and I want to say one more thing, that I will be doing the closing plenary, so please be there, and thank you again for being with us. Thank you. Thank you so much. Come here, please. Thank you. Thank you. Pleasure.
Incredible program. The best thing that ever happened in my life. go for it. That's all I can say.
In 2006, in association with the Women's Forum for the Economy and Society, together with McKinsey and INSEAD Business School, we launched the Cartier Women's Initiative Award to support, to encourage, and to accompany projects by women's entrepreneurs. 6 winners, 1 per continent, $20,000 coaching from Cartier, from McKinsey, and from INSEAD for 1 year.
We are now well known everywhere. People are coming to me, to Bioessence, because they know about the Cartier Award.
Having, a support, which was the coach, was very, very important.
I have been in touch with one of the contestants from Africa, supporting her in capacity of mentor, helping her write her business plan, as well as making sure she's well prepared for the competition.
We're looking at financial figures, at the organizational structure, how it's managed, a whole bunch of different criteria which are really, really important because we do want these programs and organizations to succeed.
Just wanted to get your attention. Each region has a panel of jury members who evaluate the submissions that have been received and rank them according to 3 criteria: creativity, sustainability, and social impact.
This is a dream, a sweet dream. Thank you for all. Thank you to Cartier.
Today I'm a finalist, I'm a winner. Tomorrow I will keep on investing in youth and hopefully investing in other women.